There are 52 aptitudes that can be measured. And in the book, we focus on those four, the core four, a lot. And then you actually, when you take the assessment that's included with the book, you're going to actually learn about 14. But back to the spatial, because we picked the four that really influence a lot when it comes to our jobs and careers and our avocations.
Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. We are going to have a really interesting conversation today. So get your notebooks out, ladies. We have Betsy Wills and Alex Ellison on the show. Welcome, ladies.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Excited to be
having us.
here.
Well, we are really interested in talking about aptitude in midlife because we get a lot of emails from women saying, I'm over 50. I'm not happy in my career anymore. I want to pivot, but I don't know what I want to pivot to. So, your book, Your Hidden Genius, really goes in depth about finding kind of which of the four aptitudes that might apply to us. So I thought we could start with why is aptitude so important for when we're looking for a job that we might enjoy? And I'll start with Betsy.
Great. Okay. Well, it's the perfect time actually in midlife to evaluate and revisit where your natural and innate abilities lie. Our aptitudes, or what I would say our hardwiring, are stay with us throughout life. And they become fixed by the time we've gone through puberty. But you can take an aptitude assessment and learn what they are, and they will be the same at 17, 27, 47, 77. So they're really fixed information that we can keep returning to redeploy into skills. And they really uncover why it is we enjoy certain things and why other things are more of an uphill battle.
Before we came on the air, I was talking with Alex about when I was in high school back in the dark ages.
Me too. Me too.
Back in 1986. And I remember I was telling her I went to my guidance counselor office into the big old block white computer with the floppy disk and took this test. And I ended up being an elementary school teacher. But at that moment in my brain, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. So I knew the questions they were asking me and how to not go toward the ones that were going toward teaching. And Alex, you had a really good explanation as to why that was happening.
Well,
Why
yeah,
was it happening?
you're not alone, Bridget, because that's the problem, the limitation with self-reported surveys, because you could game it. You're like, I do not want to be a teacher. I've talked to, people who said I did not want to do what my mom or dad did, so I intentionally answered the opposite way. So you kind of had this fixed and you were not recognizing your innate aptitudes because the only way to really see what those are is through an objective assessment. So these are, when you take the assessment that's included in your hidden genius, you're going through a series of timed brain games and you don't know what they're looking for. You cannot game it. And so you're getting something that's really true and objective about you. It's not a timestamp of where you are in your life. It's really enduring.
Yeah, and I graduated from St. Cecilia in Nashville in 1985, and those were the tools. I mean, I always say it was the Stone Age, truly, in career guidance. And thank God we're not there anymore. I mean, it's a new day. And think of every area of our lives where data is transforming them. So, healthcare, you would never just self-report that you had breast cancer to your doctor and not expect that they would run tests, right? And so today we have personalized medicine and they run tests, they get lots of data. The same is true with dating. A lot of people now use those algorithms and find the love of their life and much more efficiently in some ways, or at least a friend using the data. Well, career management and career guidance has now made that leap. And the way it's happened is using aptitude assessments. So the great news is for all of us who are midlife or at any age or stage, you can get those aptitudes assessed now, and you will have gotten the same information you would have gotten at 17 had you had the advantage of this. So it's never too late to know what they are.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting that your aptitude doesn't change as you
No.
get older because we'll hear women say, for whatever reason, financial, family, I had to take this job. And I've been in this career for a long time, but there's always been this whisper of an interest in something.
Right.
And now that I'm 40, 50, 60, I've always wanted to write a book or I've always wanted to start my own business. And so is that whisper your aptitude? I'll
Such a
say,
great question, Colleen. I mean, I think we all sort of either have observed this in ourselves, these little inclinations, or they were observed in us at a young age. But we pushed them aside. We didn't explore them. Here's what actually happens a lot of the times with that natural aptitude is you ignore it because you think because it's easy to you, you think everyone else can do that. You think everyone else has that aptitude.
A big
And this happens all the
discount, we
time.
call it. You're
We
discounting
just
yourself.
exactly. We do this all the time. We think, oh, well, that's so easy. When we talk to people and we debrief after they've done the assessment, they say, oh, that exercise, that was so easy. That wasn't a real thing, was it? Oh, yeah. No, that is not easy for everybody. Other people want to throw their computers out the window when they're doing that exercise. And so it's stopping and celebrating those things that have always come easily to you and have always made you feel like you were in your flow and element. And that's actually something you need to be celebrating.
can we
You know,
talk about the four aptitudes?
that's what I was going to ask.
So, well, let's start with the first one, spatial visualization. Betsy,
Right.
what does that mean for someone and how does that apply in aptitude?
Well, let me back up real quick and just say, there are 52 aptitudes that can be measured. And in the book, we focus on those four, the core four, a lot. And then you actually, when you take the assessment that's included with the book, you're going to actually learn about 14. But back to the spatial, because we picked the four that really influence a lot when it comes to our jobs and careers and our avocations. And spatial ability is like a fork in the road for people. The assessment, if you remember, is a paper folding exercise. And again, if there's one that menaces people, that's the one. Because some people can see the answer on that one just in 2 seconds, and other people will never see the answer. It's not good or bad to be spatial, but if you are, and we learn that from the assessment, there's a whole host of possibilities for you that more than likely, and again, women particularly, you've probably never explored. So spatial ability, starts emerging in people very young. You'll notice if the mothers out there or parents out there, some children are building the Taj Mahal out of Legos at age, 4, and other people, they just don't want to build the treehouse in the backyard or put the bike together. They're just not interested in that type of thing. That's early spatial ability coming out, but we don't truly know really if you have spatial ability, for till you're maybe entering your teens. But if you have it, there are so many careers that you may have never considered before: engineering, architecture, landscape design, graphic design, so many things using that spatial ability. And for people who really don't have it, they tend to think like things that are much more abstract. It could be teaching, philosophy, any number of things, but they don't have an urge to work with their hands. So uncovering that and confirming that with the assessment opens up just so many new ideas for you to explore.
And then we've got the other ones there as well. And I'm looking at them. I'm hoping I wrote
Idea generation,
idea
Alex.
generation.
Oh, yeah. We were talking
Yeah.
about this a little bit before. I said, when we first hopped on the call, I said, I love the name of your show. And they immediately said, yeah, we're big idea people. And I said, that's probably, you were probably correct in that, but you could use the assessment to confirm that. What we talk about all the time with these aptitudes, unlike, other tests we've taken, growing up, is there's no A or F, there's no pass or fail. There's no good or bad, really. It's you either have this aptitude and it should be used in this context to really help you thrive, or you have this aptitude and it could be used in this context to help you thrive. So it's all about finding the right settings and situations for yourself. And idea rate is a great example because Betsy and I score in the opposite way on this one. So Betsy is what's called a brainstormer. And so people who are brainstormers, they have an aptitude for a rapid rate of idea generation. It's not looking at the quality of your ideas. It's literally how quickly you think on the spot. I was watching the Grammys on Sunday night, and the rapper, only the third to win, best rap album, Ducci. She is a brainstormer, man. I mean, people who can do freestyle rap like that is like a flow of ideas, and there's no stopping it. I, on the other hand, score on the opposite end. I'm what's called a concentrated focuser. I'm all about implementation and execution. I usually will execute the first idea that comes to my brain. Usually will get very excited about that. I sometimes get a little bit stubborn about it, but I don't let any moss grow under my feet. I'm like, let's just go, let's just try it, right? And I just like to jump in. And so there are different scores that actually can create a wonderful team or pair. In this case, writing a book, right? And so there was this push and pull and this back and forth between our two aptitudes, and I think that ultimately ended in a better book.
Yeah. And that's what Pat Shea was that we
Yes.
knew.
All day. Yes.
Yes.
All day.
Yes,
That was
she
a
could get up there.
fabulous story. Yes. And how she went to the women's prison and she works with the YWCA, was put on her feet. You're
Yeah,
the
she didn't
second.
know she had to make a speech, right? She
Yes.
arrived, and these are the stories all through the book to illustrate. But again, Pat Shea arrives at the women's prison, and she thought she was picking up, something they'd
A
done, and she was
donation.
just going to say, "Hey, how are you?" And they were like, "Okay, so are you ready? We've allotted an hour," and she was like, "What?" And because she had that idea rate, she was able to, and she had practiced her, speech giving skills, not necessarily the same speech, but she was able to improvise. And that's a great advantage as an idea rate person. But let me just say this, having because I have idea rate, you wouldn't want someone like your surgeon or your pilot to have this. Okay. So don't
Squirrel.
despair. If you don't have it, that can be good news. That's what's unique about aptitudes is many times the things that are not as strong in us unlock our opportunity.
Right. That's what I like too. I didn't have a chance to take the assessment yet because I'm trying to find an hour and a half time, which I can to be uninterrupted to take it. But what I did like about what you said, you're not going to pass or fail this test. There's no, and that is I'm so curious to see about my assessment, what happens there, because I don't like being scored. And so
Ah,
I know that about myself. Like if I'm doing a fun quiz, I'm so happy and carefree. But if I know this is going to be scored or I'm going to get a grade, I'm like, oh gosh.
Well, we
So,
do a lot of prep work in the, pre-time to just say, hey, relax, because again, there truly are no bad scores. Somebody explained it to me as if you think about a soundboard, what makes the beautiful music is the combination. And so most people have, between 6 or 7 really dominant aptitudes. And then those aptitudes that aren't as dominant, again, are often the magic for them. So truly, there's nothing to be nervous about. We all have test anxiety, I know, but this is not that way.
yeah, you don't want a soundboard that's all on high volume, right?
No.
All the dials
Good
are up to the
point.
top. Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
What about inductive reasoning? That's the next one. Can you talk a little bit, Alex, about that?
Yeah, so this is one that I think this is an interesting one because it's a problem-solving aptitude. And it's looking at literally how comfortable you are with information gaps and doing work where you always have incomplete information. So some people are very comfortable with that. So put them in a position where, they're an ER doctor and they have to, sort of remediate the problem to keep the patient alive, even when they don't have all the answers yet, right? They have to be able to act under that kind of pressure. People, but also in less emergency situations like anthropologists, you're studying people and civilizations from 1,000 years ago. You can't go talk to these people. You've got to fill in the gaps. So people who score as inductive thinkers or diagnostic problem solvers, we call them, they're very comfortable with those information gaps. And then the opposite, these are the fact checkers. And so the fact checkers are the meticulous, methodical researchers. They're the ones who say, I need to sleep on it and I'll get back to you tomorrow. These are the people who would have caught George Santos before he got, before all the lies came out, right? They're the fact checkers, they're the opposition researchers for those political candidates. And we need both, right? And actually, there's a story we tell in the book about the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And it was around Thanksgiving, and I said, Betsy, I want to know what aptitudes one would need to be the producer to be able to put this parade on. What a massive scale project, right? And I thought for sure this person would need to be a diagnostic problem solver, the quick under pressure, information gaps, super comfortable. The opposite was actually true. It turns out that the Macy's parade has an 18-month runway. And the person who was the creative director had everything locked in months in advance. And intentionally, because he did not like last minute, putting out fires and problem solving, he had made sure all the I's were dotted. There were backup plans to his backup plans to his backup plans, right?
Yeah, what was the Santa
So
Claus thing he said?
yeah, the Santa sprains an ankle. We've got three other Santas in the wings ready to go, and so that was a surprise to us. But what a delightful surprise to see, that it's actually this thing that this fact checker, which might be a deficit in some situations, is absolutely the asset in this particular job. And we talk about that a lot. Again, there's no good or bad aptitudes. It's just an aptitude used in the wrong setting could feel like a deficit.
Was he the one that had when COVID came around and we all thought the parade happened?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And it's completely different. Like what we saw on television is not at all what happened.
It was an
Exactly.
optical illusion. Yeah.
That was crazy. That was crazy. And so then
Number 4,
was that the
sequential reasoning.
Yes.
Betsy, what about sequential reasoning?
Well, this is really what we sometimes call the logic aptitude. It's people who kind of see the big picture very quickly. They don't like to bother with the steps. Okay, so they can fall into the trap. Let's say everything has sort of a yin and yang or an Achilles heel. But these are people who can kind of mostly solve problems in their head or figure out the steps in their head without writing something down. So they wouldn't write an outline for a paper. They really hate geometry where they have to write out all the steps for the teacher. That's a bother for them. They can fall into the trap of feeling like their team are mind readers because it's all going on in their head. And so stopping to explain something can be not so fun for them. It's a great skill when, they have to figure out a problem on the fly or reroute a trip, for instance. They don't need to stop and even write it down. They just do it in their head. But it can have its own set of challenges. The opposite end of this continuum are people we call process supporters. And these are people who love to maintain systems. Usually they're hyper organized, their filing cabinets are all neat and orderly. They keep a calendar. My husband's one of these, okay? And I'm like, he'll send me a calendar invite. I'm not kidding. If I talk to him on the phone in 5 minutes and I say, I'm going to stop by Whole Foods and pick up some salad for dinner, and then I'll see you at home, he'll send me a calendar invite for that. Like, okay, well, that's what you're doing, right? But that's a process supporter. And all of this is necessary to keep the trains running on time. Again, it's all good, but it does rule a lot about what you enjoy doing and how you find satisfaction.
Right. I was going through that trying to find before I took the assessment. And I'm like, I think as I went along, there was something about conventional. And I'm like, I think I'm conventional.
Nothing wrong with that in this context. Again, you can't tell me. I know you're not conventional, but you may.
No, not. I think I do like to have a plan out there.
She
like
loves a plan. She loves a plan.
Well, yeah, think about people who love a template, like an entrepreneur maybe not need a template, but we always talk about, in this one, some people like to take something from good to great. And so they're the great improvers. And they really can't think with a blank page on certain planning things, but man, they can improve anything if there's a template. Yeah. They just work better that way.
That's interesting.
Process supporters are the people who actually let the cake cool before they ice it.
There you go.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't work for us.
Follow the steps.
Another thing that I think is really interesting and helpful for our listeners is that, Betsy, you talk about career wellness is a whole life strategy.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, especially for women, we realize that I'm a pivoter. Every 12 years, I pivoted a job. I never thought that was a big deal. But as I get older, people are like, what do you mean? I went from an attorney to a Pilates instructor to a podcaster.
Okay.
So I feel that you take your experience from each position and bring it forward.
Of course.
But there were people who thought I was insane for leaving the law to become a Pilates instructor. They were like, why would you do that? But can you talk about how career wellness is a whole life idea?
Yeah. So I think that the two words we'd say is there's boredom and there's burnout. Okay. And the bottom line is we're all, if we look back, going to pivot many, many times. Some of us stay closer in the field that we started in, but generally, in women, we're playing many, many roles all at once, oftentimes. that's the, fact. But let's talk about being a lawyer, for example.
Do we have to? I'm only
Yes, we do.
just
No, but
kidding.
you can literally become sick in your career. And the reason for that is you might just, I say, would be you've got unmet aptitudes that are not being worked out and you've ignored them. So these rear their head eventually. Now, the best thing you can do is, recognize what your aptitudes are, because no one job is ever going to satisfy all of them. But my suspicion, Colleen, is that you have a spatial ability, and that's one reason you liked Pilates. It's a very much 3D type of exercise, and that law is highly abstract, the other end of that continuum generally. Now, if I were talking to you right when you were starting, I might have always said, think about real estate law, where you're going to get to use that 3D ability, or patent law, or create an avocation that uses this 3D ability on the side, because we all need to make money, and there's different times of our life where the salary matters more. But career wellness is about, not letting your career get ill, and tolerating something so long that it's eroding you inside, but also, coming at it like you were taking care of your body to be healthy, and knowing what your aptitudes are allows you to go, okay, this is what's going on with my career. I'm using, most of my aptitudes. I'm not overtaxed or on too many of them, but I'm going to, work hard to make my whole life better by really nurturing my avocations or vocations or volunteer work, for instance.
And a lot of people, I think you said this earlier, Alex, you kind of say, this is what my parents did. Or even the education system itself can kind of put you into a role, or maybe make you feel like you are not qualified for anything. Can you address how taking these assessments and aptitude, finding out what your aptitude is, can be helpful?
Well, that's why, we say, Bridget, it is a whole life strategy, because so many of us, we take what our, eighth grade, teacher said, or our 11th grade, math teacher said as the word, and that's what we're going to live by. Or we take those early career counseling sessions as sort of a life sentence. And really, with the world changing so rapidly, technology changing so rapidly, the nature of your work will change multiple times throughout your life. Or even, when you're at the end of your career and you're thinking about how you want to spend your free time and your avocations, you're going to be reevaluating. And so all these forks in the road are going to cause us to reevaluate how we're spending our waking hours. And the wonderful thing about an aptitude assessment, it doesn't matter when you took it, it is the compass that you can return to remind yourself of how to navigate the storm. These things about you remain constant when everything else seems to be shifting. And I think that's a really wonderful feeling, and especially as we get older. I think there's these feelings of obsolescence, like, am I still relevant today? And it can really cause a lot of dread and anxiety. And the answer is yes, absolutely, because your talents are always relevant. It's just a matter of getting creative and how will you apply them in different contexts. So this is something that we believe is you're constantly reevaluating throughout your life. It's not just a one and done early in your career, and you have to live by that for the rest of your life.
So
I think it's important to point out here, aptitudes are not skills.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an aptitude like sequential reasoning, it can be developed. And that's what we talk about in the book. Like, here's all the different ways you might deploy that. And so whatever age you're in, you can always continue to learn, but this gives you sort of a finer sift of where you should start looking and trying things.
And it's amazing too, because you can use that, because podcasting wasn't a thing.
Oh.
When I graduated from high school or even college, it wasn't a thing. So it is something that you could use, and as new careers develop,
Mm-hmm.
it's still, your aptitude could still apply.
Yeah, think of all the skills you picked up just podcasting, just technical skills that you never knew. We've all learned to Zoom after all, sort of.
Yes.
So for someone who, may be in her 50s and she decides, I really want to pivot my career, they take the aptitude test, she takes the aptitude test, and she comes out with one of the, 15 that you said that would come out as, what does she do with that? Like I know in the book you give stories, which is wonderful, but what is like the first thing she should look to for that once
Well, first
she's
of all, she's
categorized?
going to come out with a combination. So as unique as our fingerprints. Okay.
Hmm.
So so it's not going to be, oh, you're this, that's it. It's going to be, okay, you've got all this kind of collection of things. But what's neat about Science, which is the platform on which this is based, is all those aptitudes have been mapped to thousands and thousands of jobs. So there's actually a fit, like dating, that you will be presented with online. And that's really handy. Now, at 50 years old, you're probably not going to go back to engineering school. And it may bring up a lot because you might have a combination that if you were 17 would say, consider engineering. But don't despair. Look for patterns. We always say don't take it literally. But if you saw tons of engineering things come up, for instance, you might want to explore working in some type of technical field. You might go back and get a certification. And I know somebody went back and got a certification in medical imagery, for instance, for, on the weekends. I mean, it may or may not be paid work though, that you're going to, pursue next. Every situation is different, but you're going to find out a huge amount of information of what types of jobs would be fits for you and why. So that's one outcome. Alex, you can talk about what else you would,
Yeah, I think,
the
sometimes it's,
reports, like the discussion.
yeah. Yeah, you'll get a discussion guide, which is great because that gives you language to now be able to advocate for yourself with your boss or your teammates to say, these are the kinds of situations that fatigue me. I always sort of knew this intuitively, but now I have language to describe why this wears at me or why this fatigues me. It's also an invitation to raise your hand and sit in on those design meetings if you're spatial, or to sit on a board, to volunteer to do the fundraising. You're going to get some suggestions that are career suggestions, but you might turn those into avocations. You might also just make subtle pivots at your existing job and take on new tasks and try to delegate out other tasks. And so this language makes you a better advocate for yourself. Right. I mean, that was for me the biggest thing is I knew certain things were frustrating and certain things were fun, but this assessment was an invitation to stand up and to say, I want to do that. Can I please have a seat at the table?
Yeah. Another thing I like so much about this assessment, this particular one, that if you buy the book, you have a code that you can use, but it's not crazy expensive. Can you talk about how, I'll ask Betsy, how you can go about taking this assessment, the various ways you can do that?
Well, it's good to know this is Science, which is the company I co-founded in 2010. We actually bought the assessment. It's been going since the 1920s, but it's literally about $750 to take it. Okay, because you have to go to a center, you had to then, do it one-on-one. Computing power, and what we did with Science is we brought it into an online, we mapped it with the government, all these jobs. We did a lot of technology advances using a lot of money and drove the price to $49 actually. But because I, was fortunate enough to be the co-founder of this, I was able to offer it with the book for just the price of the book. So every book comes with a sticker on the back, or if you download it, you can, there's a code that you'll figure out, and that's all. It's self-explanatory on the site. But we're just thrilled because the reason we wrote the book in the first place is for people like us. I was 35 when I took it for the first time. Alex was 25. All ages can benefit from this. And that was the goal. It's really a mission as much as it is a book.
Alex, can you talk about how aptitude is not an enneagram
Mhm.
or the Myers-Briggs? Because I think a lot of people think I'm an 8, I'm a this, you know what I mean? That's how are they different?
Yeah, I'm a 1. I actually I recently discovered that I had mistyped myself. I love all of this, and I always have loved any tool to help with self-discovery. And when I first started using assessments and exploring them, it was in my own counseling practice. I wanted to find tools that would help my clients discover what they wanted to do in terms of their education and careers. What I realized was that just as Bridget was saying, her experience in high school is students can game these things and adults can game these things too, right? We all have our own bias that can mess with the results. And so as much as I loved the self-reported interest and personality assessments and surveys, as much as I love those and I think they are good conversation starters and they do reveal some interesting things about us, I did want something more objective. And so that's where the aptitude assessment piece comes in. But I don't think that any one is better or worse. They're just different tools for different projects, if you will. So, I love Enneagram as a way to explain relationships, romantic and otherwise, and how we show up and what our shadow sides are and sort of how we're reacting and what we're trying to cover up maybe from childhood and all of these things. Like I think there's a lot of dimensions there to the Enneagram, and Myers-Briggs is also a wonderful personality tool. And interest surveys too. I think an interest survey, the more life experience you have, perhaps the interest survey is a little more reliable because you actually have been out in the world and experienced your interests and explored them further. But certainly, aptitude assessment is the only objective measure of your traits. You cannot game it, and you really cannot assess what your aptitudes are without an assessment. Someone couldn't just come up to you and say, you're definitely spatial. I might have a hunch, but you really would have to assess that.
Yeah, we all look at other people, unfortunately, as a flawed version of us. And this takes that away.
Yeah.
It's kind of handy because, your confidence in the score. We see students and adults likewise sit up straighter when they get their results because a lot of times they feel like, oh, I must have failed that. And then they get their results and they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea. It's really wonderful to watch.
It's sometimes a wonderful invitation to explore new activities that you had closed off to yourself. Yeah.
Another thing I like about that, the way you would take it on your own computer. I know whenever I've taken a test, and this is probably something about me, but if you're in that big exam room and you're taking whatever that exam is, and somebody's already finished, and you're like, oh, I'm not even halfway finished.
Yeah.
That's just another relaxation point, I think.
Yeah, you don't have to have Arid Extra Dry with you.
Always helpful.
Yes. Do they still make that?
No.
But
Secret. I don't know.
yeah, one of those. But a quote that I don't know why this stuck out to me when I was reading it. It was, the learning curve to competence can be steep, but once you've scaled it, you'll find yourself on even ground.
Yeah.
So if you want to, either one of you want to just talk about that.
But I think this is a good time to do a little exercise if y'all are open to
Uh-oh.
it,
Yeah, sure.
because it relates to this very much.
Illustrate, yeah.
All right, so take a pencil out. Maybe your listeners will do the same thing, and just write your name. Write your full name, like first, middle, last.
Okay.
Okay. Then when you're finished doing that, I want you to switch hands and do the same thing.
This could take a while.
I remember this from the book.
Yeah, good. Okay, so how did that feel writing with your non-dominant hand?
Messy.
Really difficult. Yeah, and much harder.
Yeah, and slow,
slower.
right?
Yeah, I'm still doing it. I have a long name.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, if for some reason you had to use your non-dominant hand, say you were in a horrible accident,
Right.
and you did it consistently, even if I made you use your non-dominant hand till the end of the day, you would get better with practice. Okay. And so aptitudes are like this, like certain things are a little bit more of an uphill climb, but with practice, we can become competent. But Bridget and Colleen, you're never going to be a calligrapher if that situation were to occur. Okay. So knowing what your aptitudes are is knowing how to go through your life using your dominant hand. So it doesn't give you an excuse not to have to be competent in things that aren't your strengths or your aptitudes, but it is a clue to be like, let's do more of this stuff that's in my dominant space. Does that make sense? So when we talk about learning a job, back to your quote, sometimes learning a job can be harder than actually doing it. So take heart. This isn't a dream killer. If you want to do something, you can. But let's really focus on the things that come naturally and easily to us. And let's, reveal what they are with this assessment and then lean into those.
We're kind of challenging the notion, that we Americans especially, we love people who work hard and we reward that. We like to see people who work hard be rewarded. But I do think many of us are working hard at the wrong things. And so it feels like walking into a wall all the time. You're like working harder and harder and not quite seeing the growth that some of the people around you are seeing. And so when you work to and play to your aptitudes, you actually see this growth and you feel it. You feel like you're in your element.
Yeah, and it's motivating.
Yeah.
And that's really ageless, which is wonderful for our demographic as well. And Bridget and I we appreciate the fact that you're giving options for people. They know what they don't want, but they don't necessarily know what they want. So
Yeah.
sometimes just figuring out, okay, well, I have an aptitude for this, puts you in the right direction. So Your Hidden Genius is the book, and you get to take the test with, I don't want to call it a test.
It's an assessment.
It's an
Game.
assessment.
It's games.
You get to take the assessment with it. And Betsy and Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really informative.
Thank you for
Thank you
having us.
us. It was a fun conversation.